Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode. Today with me I have not one but two guests, Wayne Mitchell and Graeme Gabriel. They join me so together we can speak about enabling productivity, maximizing personal success in the world of workforce management. We'll touch automation, process optimization as we walk through a case study of a major workforce transformation. Join us. Let's go. This episode is sponsored by NICE, leading customer experience platform, but more on that later. Hi everyone, welcome back to the show today. Not one, two guests. Graeme, Wayne, how are you guys doing? Welcome to our show.
Yeah, good to be here. Thank you.
All good.
So, guys, before any ado, I think is due to some introductions. Not picking on any specific order. Wayne, I will start with you. Do you mind giving us a brief overview on who you are, a bit of your role and your experience in workforce management to start us with?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I'm Wayne Mitchell. I'm a planning and scheduling manager and work for kind of both from the mobile and home broadband perspective. So I've been with the company since 1999 in various different roles, but I would say since about 2001 in kind of workforce planning, either be that real time or for the last kind of like 13, 14 years across in the planning and scheduling world. So my job is very much about kind of planning and forecasting the demand for a number of lines of business, and then making sure we've got the right number of kind of agents or people in place to support those customer calls so they're in the right place at the right time. But very keen to make sure that what we're doing balances to make sure we've got a good fit from an employee perspective and they have a good work experience as well as a good customer experience. And that's kind of where my focus has really been and leading the kind of a lot of work we do around workforce management.
Thank you, Ryan. And I assume you guys crossed paths a while back. Graeme, can you give us a bit of an intro to you and your current role as a solutions consultant in the space?
Yeah, of course. So my role at the moment is as a solutions consultant for NICE. So my background, I'll give you the I don't know if it's the long or the short version, but basically I've been in contact centers, and you probably guessed by looking at my age, for the best part of 30 years. I was an agent for a couple of years, and then I did all the normal things. So I went through as an agent, then I ended up around a back office for a bit in a contact center, but then ended up back in the contact center and sort of evolved into a planning role. So I started off as a forecaster, scheduler, then sort of headed up the planning team for a little while. And then I left the contact center after about 10 years operational contact center. And I spent the last sort of like 15 or so years working as a consultant for multiple, don't judge me, but multiple WFM vendors as well. I've been with NICE for about 2.5 years, but NICE.WFM was the WFM solution that I used when I was an operational contact center. So it's sort of like when you come back to your first love.
It's almost coming back home after a long trip. Thank you so much. So you guys have, as everyone can hear, extensive experience in workforce management. The subject we want to speak about today is more about something that I would say is in everyone's minds for different reasons. So we have been going through an era where efficiency is very important, streamlining process, simplifying our tech stack to a certain extent is important. And what we are seeing is these more and more organizations start having this in mind. I would say that when for you in this case, you guys went a bit above and beyond to kind of like streamline and maximize your workforce management and kind of the engagement and the efficiency of the processes. Do you mind speaking with us a bit about like what was the major transformation that you guys did and kind of share what were the main challenges? What was the reasons why you found out that the problem was actually big and you had to do something?
Yeah. Sure. So I think for those that don't know the background, essentially at one point we were 3 companies that became one company, as what was BT or BT Group purchased EE. It already had the PlusNet brand. Obviously we've now come together from 3 brands and we're now kind of new EE from a customer's perspective, but obviously that meant we had 3 different ways of working, 3 WFM platforms. And all the challenge that comes with that. So I guess the problem statement was really that we had 3 of everything, and that's inefficient. So we need to kind of consolidate that down. But it was also an opportunity. So I prefer to look at it as an opportunity statement rather than a problem statement, really, because we needed to get down to one, and we could either pick the best of each of those brands, or just completely rewrite and go with something new that we felt was better. So we really tried to put the employees at the heart of a lot of what we did, as part of that. So kind of obviously the first thing was to get down to one WFM. So luckily the two that we had were an old version of NICE IEX and a nice shiny new version of NICE IEX. So obvious decision, go on to the nice shiny new one. So
sorry to interrupt. Quick for context, what was the size of your operations at the time when you started that merge?
So I think in terms of what we would have in the WFM space, about 8,500 people.
Okay, because this helps kind of like putting everything into perspective on how big of a challenge it was.
Yeah, it's quite a few people to move across here. About 8,500 people, 33 different lines of business in terms of different call types and queues and customers that we support. So that was the first challenge. But we set ourselves quite a kind of a stretching goal. So we migrated. For anyone that's done a WFM migration knows they are the most pleasurable experiences in the world to do, to move and lift and shift all that data from one platform to another. We did it in 9 weeks. All 8,000 plus people, all lines of business, and that includes their live active schedules, all of their holiday bookings, and all that good stuff that goes with it, so that from an employee perspective, from an agent, they logged out on Friday night, logged in on, say, Monday morning on the new platform, and it was as if they were still the same. So all that work went on in the background to make sure that we did that quick. And that if you think we also had multiple versions of activity codes, so one company might have called I don't know, coaching one thing, or an HR or a team meeting another thing. So we consolidated all those down, and using the smart sync features of IEX, lifted all that data out and pushed it all straight back in a seamless way, so that from an operational perspective, it just kept going. But we, like I say, we used it to condense down and get rid of some of the inefficiencies of activity codes that we didn't need anymore. I think we reduced overall across the 3 brands, we reduced the activity codes by 58% versus what we had previously. Yeah, it was huge. In terms of data values that we had to recognize that we stored in the system that our scheduling team had to maintain, we reduced those by 50%. By kind of really challenging back to the business to say, well, do you really need this in our WFM platform, or can you source it elsewhere? So we're really kind of streamlined what we were operating with down.
Yeah.
And that gave us the opportunity to then say, okay, well, how can we improve? Now that we're not doing all this, what can we do better?
Yeah. Wait, let me stop you there. So kind of like from a challenge standpoint, so you touched on the efficiency. So first the size and getting everything into one. You touched, which is migrating the platforms. You touched about improving in the end of the employee engagement, like you really wanted to make it easier, which I'm assuming that then benefits the WFM professionals in terms of flexibility, scheduling flexibility, and reduce the amount of burden that the manual work has. Graeme, let me divert to you. Like, how common are those challenges? Like, is this like the number one thing you see? I'm assuming this at this scale might be different than others, but like just as an experienced consultant, have you seen this everywhere?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Wayne actually said put the employees at the center of what they were doing, which we're seeing. Both Wayne and I, and all of us actually on the call, have been in WFM a long time, and the old narrative for WFM was very much efficiency was the big word. It was all about squeeze the resource, get the most out of people that you can. That narrative has certainly changed over the last 4 or 5 years. So Wayne's echoing a lot of the messaging we're hearing from current customers, like what can we do from an employee engagement perspective, and putting employees at the center, I think it's not uncommon, but certainly the way Wayne and his team have approached it, I think is slightly unique. He talked about having the different, the shiny version of NICE.WFM and the older version of NICE.WFM. What we like to think of from Wayne's perspective, what he does for us at NICE, is we always think there's enough functional headroom in the system to do stuff. Wayne's really pushing with his team the boundaries of that and being innovative in the way that they use it. And being innovative, the way that they use the solution helps us sell the kind of stuff that Wayne's been able to deliver. So having that message, employee engagement really at the center, and then using the functionality in our tool to help deliver on that, I think is really, really key. And they've done a fantastic job. Hence the reason why we're talking to Wayne today.
So when you start a bit to touch on the results, there's some big numbers you said. I love like the reductions on 50% on several of the codes. Like, I would love to know more about how big was the impact when we were starting to see the changes coming in. how big of a cog was it to move for your team, for you and your teams? Can you detail a bit more about like not only the outcomes but a bit on like the journey itself, on how challenging it was?
I think just from that part, not I'm going to be honest, not overly, because we were the owner of the system. We'd allowed these things in, so we just had to have honest conversations to get rid of that and discuss what the benefit of it was. So by us not having to maintain all this extra data, all these extra codes, and being on one system, it freed up some of our resource to then go, okay, well, what can we do differently? What can we do better? And that's kind of where we move on to in terms of our story, in terms of, okay, how can we build a flexi time solution and enhance that so that our people can kind of get a bit more flexibility in their shifts and in what they're doing in their day. So we built that and enhanced on that, and then use some of the automation to try and streamline some of that work down as well. So we kind of extract that data. So I guess just to elaborate on it, so flexi time is where we allow our people to kind of work some extra hours up to their weekly contracted hours, and then they can take that time back, but separate from their annual leave balance, etc. But we don't dictate when they can take it back. So they've earned it. They've built up that pot of time. So that's up to you, and you take it when you want. The challenge of making sure we meet a customer need is that's on our team. We'll take care of that. You take your leave because you've earned it. So we just try and really balance those. And you imagine that when you're getting up to a scale of over 8,000-9,000 people, that's quite a challenge to maintain and balance it. So some of the kind of automated feeds, like through SmartSync, etc., as Graeme said, looking at kind of what the technology did for us to say, well, how can we deliver that? How can we deliver that in an efficient way? And I guess it was a case of kind of learn and fail fast. Is definitely a key to it. So if that doesn't work right, we know what we want as the end goal. Let's just keep trying to find out how we get there in the most efficient way possible. And that's kind of where we are. And yes, there's still room for efficiency, and we are trying new things as we continue to evolve. But that allowed us to kind of implement that flexi time solution. 85% of advisors, or guides as we now call them, use that functionality. And again, we don't dictate why people take that time out. So you might have someone that just takes out because they like to go out on a Friday night. Whereas we hear stories about people who build up that time so they can take a family member to the hospital. All are equally important to us, and we don't kind of look at the reasons. It's all kind of in there. And it just kind of kept us thinking, now that we're not doing all that maintenance, what else can we do? So it was like, okay, break packages. Why 6 weeks in advance is it important that we as a scheduling function tell you you're going to have your break in 6 weeks' time on Monday morning at 9:45, versus you as an adult on the day knowing, I know when I need to go to the toilet or when I need to take a break.
Yeah,
it's crazy. So we just stopped doing it. We said, okay, we're going to leave the breaks in the system wherever the system puts them, but you have total control. Move them. If you want to keep them as 15 minutes, keep them. If you want to split them up into 5-minute segments, they're your breaks. You use them. You're an adult. We trust you. Use them as you see fit. And we went out and expressed it that way. We kind of, that's been the key. One of the key messages or learnings from us is whatever we do is we engage with the people. We don't kind of sit in the background behind the communication. So for this piece, we went out and spoke to every single team, told them what we were doing, said, look, it adds no value to us as a business or an individual or as a team. We're doing this for you because it's the right thing to do for you.
You kind of leveraged the big transformation that was happening to actually give back to your employees in a way that probably you might not have got to the same state if it was not about like the wider transformation you started.
Yeah, because if we'd still been on 3 separate versions of 3 of them, we'd have to redesign all of these things 3 times and with 3 different ways, depending on, well, actually, this system needs it this way, or this brand has this cultural way of doing it. Because we brought it all together as one and stripped it down, then we could move forward a lot quicker and try these things.
And let you touch a bit on not only the automation, but you touched a bit on, like, for instance, the ability on the breaks. I really liked what you said, which is trusting people as adults and really treating them differently, kind of, which so far some people would see a huge risk on that because they kind of like the old mentality, kind of like the different way to approach it. Is there any kind of like results you could share on like what that led to? It's not an experiment. You really are, you have that life. So any major results you see?
So it contributed towards an ESAT improvement. I think it was 8 or 9 points at the time. So I wouldn't say this in isolation because there was many other things happening across the business, but certainly from the feedback we've had, this combined with a number of other initiatives we ran. Like I say, there's the flexi time, there's that. We changed the way we did Christmas to allow people to pick their own shifts rather than us design shifts and say, right, your shift options are you can do it a 10 till 2 or a 12 till 4 or pick which one you want. It was, right, tell us where you want to work. If you want to work 10 till 11, fine, put it in, we'll see what it looks like. When we trusted people to do what was right for them, and it gave us the coverage. And all these things just built that trust. And they say, in terms of our internal employee satisfaction scores, that journey helped towards an 8 or 9 point improvement.
Amazing.
And again, we can't tie it directly, but if we looked at our CSAT, our customer satisfaction scores, they were going in pretty much the same direction at the same time. So I would certainly say that there is a clear, looks like there's a correlation to us. Obviously, you can't nail it on and say, actually, that customer's happier because that person got to choose their own break. But the correlation was quite clear to see that there was improvements in both at the same time.
Yeah, can I just add to that as well? There's loads of statistics out there about employee satisfaction being linked very closely to customer satisfaction. The organisations that post the best customer sats results usually have the most engaged employees. And Wayne's point, I think you picked up on as well, Andre, as well, about taking the opportunity for the consolidation of the WFM tools as a catalyst for change. We see this a lot when we deploy WFM into organizations like Greenfield, or even if they're swapping out a system. It can be a catalyst for change in process and improvements. Some organizations don't always take the opportunity. And one of the things that Wayne and his team were different is they actually grasped that and did that and used that change to actually start to really put, and we talked about it before just a second ago, put employees at the center. And I love the fact that what they did as well was take responsibility. You know, that thing about letting agents choose when they want time off and saying to the agent, you can choose, we'll take on the responsibility to make sure the operation runs effectively. Some of those things are fantastic.
Yeah, and Graeme, let me continue with you. So Wayne also mentioned about automation. I saw that, by the way, I will link the case study for everyone that is listening to know a bit more in detail. But on the case study, he's mentioning a lot the usage of automation and kind of like, nowadays, everyone speaks about AI and automation, but I want to make it more real. There is mentions particular to RPA. I would love to know more about such technology. And Graeme, could you kind of unveil a bit like how this technology can help organizations nowadays?
Yeah, well, yeah, we've got our NICE Interactions conference coming up in June, and there's a thread on there specifically about employee engagement and efficiency in the same sentence. And what you can sort of find is trying to engage employees and do it manually can sort of be a bit of a blocker. And the ability to automate processes means you can deliver more empowerment for agents and more flexibility. RPA and robotic assistance in particular, we've got two sides of the business, and the one side is talking about RPA as maybe a catalyst to help agents when they're actually on a call and they're handling with stuff and maybe automating some processes. We're seeing that change the nature of the kind of people and that organizations are recruiting, because historically you used to have to recruit people maybe who are technically competent. That's less of a need now with the birth of automation and robotic assistance helping and guiding agents through their work. What Wayne has done is pick some, and this is where they're really good at EE, is they're innovative in the way they approach stuff, and they've taken technology and they're starting to explore now how they can use robotic automation specifically within the planning functions and not just for agents. I know, Wayne, we're going to talk about that as well, because I know you presented to our user group about this as well. But taking technology specifically that we've always thought within NICE was to help employees, he's now picking that up and using it in the planning function, which is quite interesting.
And now a word to our sponsor, NICE. It's never been easier for organizations of all sizes around the globe to create extraordinary customer experiences while meeting their key business metrics. Featuring cloud-native customer experience platforms CX1, NICE is a world leader in AI-powered self-service and agent-assisted CX software for the contact center. More than 2,000 customers and 2.7 million users rely on NICE Workforce Management, the market-leading solution. NICE.WFM enables the contact center leaders to make smarter decisions about every aspect of staff planning and management. Back to the episode. Wait, let me pick on that specifically. So do you mind sharing an example of how did automation help you, kind of from the workforce management standpoint specifically? I would love
Yeah,
to pick on
sure.
that, because and sorry to pick on that specifically, because I see more common use cases kind of more broadly, but within workforce management, still a bit defensive. So would love to see how you guys did it.
Yeah, of course. It was actually through attending interactions live during COVID. So it was kind of a virtual one. And it was kind of looking at the different sessions, and happened to go into the NIVA session, which is the kind of that automation, that assistance. And I was listening to and watching the session and just thought, that's great. I wonder if that would work to help a scheduler. So I had a chat with someone on that live session, and then that was the start of the journey. So kind of started to build a really great relationship and a team from EE, NICE, and our own kind of desktop team to say, okay, here's the technology. Yes, that's what it's meant to do, or what it was designed with in mind, but we've got some transactional type activity that our scheduling department have to do. Why can't we automate that? Why can't the robot pick up and do that well? So, and yeah, absolutely, you're starting to, and our use case is just growing and growing as time goes by. So we started out with a real kind of need, because we were decommissioning a system that scheduled a lot of our kind of coaching time and review time between our team leaders and their guides. And that was going to go back into the scheduling team, having to kind of do all of that manual scheduling, of putting a kind of coaching session in here, make sure the team leader's available, make sure the person's available, and put it in. So we build a robot that kind of just pulls all that itself, and then finds, with rules that we'll build into it, marries the data up, and then pushes that back into IX with a schedule.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to do that. Human interaction side of it is down to a couple of hours, maybe. We've just recently launched another one. Data is such an important thing. So we have our HR system, we've got our WFM system. In an ideal world, to probably just talk directly to each other. I don't know many that actually do that without someone in the middle, or you've got the case where you've got someone is reliant on sending some information to the one and then doing it again to send to the other one. And that invariably leads to mistakes, or where you might forget to update one and not the other. So if I used an example of one of our areas of business that's probably around 1,200 people in size, it would take a scheduler around 37 hours to audit all that data in IX and compare it to what we had in SAP data. And that's before we even start fixing it. That's just auditing it and saying, well, these are the things that need fixed. So now the human interaction, now that we've launched a robot that basically pulls down all that data from IX, pulls all that data from the HR system that we can marry up, does the comparison work, and then kind of presents a result to our scheduler to say, okay, here are the ones that you need to fix in IX. But you know what, I've already built you a smart sync file. I'll just push it in to the system when you tell me to. Or here are the ones that operationally a team leader needs to go and speak to HR about. And I tell you what, I've also written you an email to the team leader detailing what they need to fix. I'll send that for you now. Amazing. So the human interaction is down to maybe about half an hour.
Yeah, and I think that if you correct me, or if you want to add, like, one of the things I see is that the roles of workforce management professionals have been changing. And I think this changes also the presentation and the impact someone as a scheduler, as a planner, whatever the individual role is, can have on the organization. Because what you described is probably before they couldn't have a quarter of that impact, because they were just data scrambling and making sure that they rushing, because there were timelines for this, and now they actually can analyze and make decisions that are more impactful for the organization. So it's a living example of something that we see and we speak many times about. There is a clear opportunity, but sometimes we lack examples like the one you just described.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, you can turn that time into whatever you want. We reinvested it into, okay, now we're free that time. Go and speak to people out on the phones and on the shifts. How else can we help them? What can we do to make their experience better? What can we do differently with shifts? The bit that I probably didn't mention in this, in terms of who actually built the robot, that was our schedulers. We upskilled schedulers. So we're starting to evolve the scheduling role now, so that there are people who are our scheduling WFM experts are also building their own robots to support their journey, rather than do you go to a separate desktop team who know about robots but don't know WFM? We married the two together and said, actually, we'll create a new role almost. You're a scheduling robotic expert. We haven't come up with a job title, I guess, for it yet, but Yeah, it's they're helping that, and that engages the scheduling team on it, so it doesn't become a fear of automation and what it means to my future. They're engaged and involved, and now it's more the team to us and say, can we automate this job as well?
And sorry, Wayne, I was just going to say that's the biggest irony in any job title in planning is you recruit analysts, but then when you get them into the WFM team, they spend 75% of their time doing no analysis at all. And I don't know if this is a real phrase or not, just being admin jockeys, just moving data around to different parts and just validating data and not really doing much of the way analysis. And I know, just for a bit of context, Andre, Wayne's mentioned a couple of times SmartSync. SmartSync's a feature in the tool that allows you to push and pull data in and out of the system and do it on a real-time basis. So we see a lot of our customers using this. So specifically HR is probably the first example, but then you can use it for all kinds of stuff. And like I said earlier, one thing Wayne and his team have been really good at is being innovative, spotting opportunities, and be creative how they use that kind of capability.
I think what you just mentioned, Graeme, is I'm trying to quote, I can open it here quickly. I think when you mentioned something about the improved cross-team engagement, that you saw a change, because that what you said is the relations you now have with HR, with operation, wherever it is, because you have a different role, you can create a different impact. It changes also the way you network. It changes your profile. So the role becomes much more interesting than if you had kind of outsourced that role to someone else. Then you would still be creating just another silo maybe that could help, but would be more limited. And I think you kind of opened the possibilities to create different trees and different branches on the way people interact with each other, and they create value for the organization ultimately. I don't know if you agree, but that's kind of like what I read from what you just said.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say it's evolved the role in so many ways, but the more transactional stuff that you can get rid of, that doesn't add value in terms of people talking to people. Because whether you're a technology company like NICE or whether you're a kind of a telecoms like us, ultimately we're all about people talking to people. Yeah. That's what it's all about. And these enablers enable more of those conversations to happen. And when conversations happen, people are more engaged and more opportunities to present themselves.
I couldn't agree more. So let's shift a bit about trends and the future. So I know probably on your roadmap, when you have loads of things to be doing, I would probably start with Graeme, because I wanted to know what excites you about the future in workforce management, with all the things coming in and some of the examples that you guys just spoke, that somehow have been disrupting an industry more that has been kind of more traditional over the last few years.
So it's interesting to talk about this. We're talking about this a lot internally. There's been two sort of major changes in my opinion in WFM over the last sort of 25 years. The first one was a change from single skill to multi-skill around about the turn of the century, where we had to sort of change. Erlang used to be the go-to, and that worked great for single skilled environments, and we had to switch now to provide something a bit more efficient for multi-skilling. We chose simulation at NICE as a way to embellish Erlang. But the big change, certainly over the last 2 or 3 years, is this shift to digital. And we're seeing a lot of our customers playing a bit of catch up. For the first time in my role as a working in pre-sales, in the last 3 years, I've done 3 deals with no voice at all, that have all been digital. So there's a massive change. So certainly over the next few years, we're going to see more and more organizations having to support digital channels from a customer perspective. The stuff I talked about before about robotic assistance and the changing nature of an agent's role, we're getting rid through self-serve of all the mundane kind of transactional stuff that customers have to deal with, because they can do that themselves now through self-serve. What that does mean is when a customer contacts the contact center, the operation, they're usually with more sophisticated, more complex queries. So the nature of our agents, they need to be better at being able to understand sentiment and be better to be able to, with emotional intelligence and understand what a customer wants. And we've got to support them with that with technology as well. And we were talking internally as well about recruitment. How does that change from a recruitment perspective? What skills should we be recruiting for agents? And when we recruit agents into the contact center, should we be thinking, and this is to Wayne's point where he's talked about some of his staff building robots and stuff like that, should we consider what their career path outside of the contact center is? So we recruit people in to fulfill a specific need in the contact center, but we can also recruit people we can spot the ability maybe to move them on internally and keep adding value to the organization, other parts of the business. That's what we should be doing from a recruitment perspective. So there's lots of things, digital, the changing nature of agents, but also just making sure that employee engagement focus is there, because that's not going away at all.
Yeah, a big opportunity there for sure. And when, from your perspective, what kind of excites you about the future in this space?
I think it'd be remiss not to mention AI and where that's going. I think I don't think you can have a conversation without it these days. I think there's just a space for it, and people shouldn't be as fearful. I think what we've done in the robotic space shows that if you approach it in the right way, you can blend the two together to support each other rather than kind of replace one or the other, which I think is one of the big fears. But so that really excites me in terms of what's that going to free up? What, by getting rid of some more of these things where automation or where systems can do that and enable people to speak to people and have actual conversations and kind of really engage with each other. That's such a powerful message, and what it enables us to do. That and along with kind of what we're seeing in some of the technology space of being able to really understand the customer journey from the first point of where they maybe engage with the website. It's okay, well, why did they end up in the contact center, and really kind of trace that journey through and understand it and say, well, actually, here's a process change opportunity that we could have done that would have give that customer a better experience and maybe efficiently remove the call from ever happening, or at least by the time it gets to speaking to someone, they already know that part of a journey has happened. They know that the person's been on this website and they've looked at this particular information, and they're ready to say, okay, Graeme, I can see that you were looking at this. How can I help? What can we do to make that happen for you? How can we make your day better? And I just think as we're seeing that technology evolve and the ability to marry those all up, I think that's kind of a really exciting opportunity, along with what, from an employee perspective, what we can do, some of these kind of new functionalities and tools, and saying, you know what, we've got remote work and that's great. Now, what else can we do to engage, to make it a really balanced experience? Because I think for so long it was so focused on efficiency. We need the smallest amount of people to deliver the biggest results, to get that service level target, no matter what. And you're right, as per earlier in the call, that shift towards actually people need to have a good experience.
Yeah.
And we are seeing that. And as that continues to evolve, and we've got more stuff that we're working on, more technology parts that we're discussing with NICE in terms of how that might support us and some of the things that we would like to do, and how we can support a broader spectrum of people to maybe come and work in a contact center environment that historically couldn't. There's just things that we're looking at that this will enable us to do, and yeah, how that's going to look in a few years, that really excites me in terms of opportunities.
Yeah, I think we have an interesting future ahead for sure. Gentlemen, kind of to wrap things up, what advice would you give to anyone either seeking digital transformation on the workforce management space, or someone just starting now that are listening now and kind of listening from either mistakes or the successes, and they're going to pave their own career? Like, what advice would you give? And I don't know who wants to start.
Yeah, from my perspective, if you think it, try it. What's the worst that can happen is fail fast, learn from it and move on. That's what we did. No idea is too ridiculous to try, because you know what, if you try 10 ideas, one of them might be just that amazing one that puts you ahead of everyone else. So don't fear change, don't fear trying something new.
So I'm going to obviously talk from a technology perspective, obviously being from a vendor, but yeah, Wayne's point is true. I think, you can have a strategy, you can have a vision that you want to do, but technology is, and that'll map out a path, but it's the technology that'll light the way to that path. So when you're thinking about what you want to do, think very, very carefully about the technology, because Wayne's already talked about different systems talking to each other. We've coined a phrase internally at NICE called the Frankenstack, which we talk to a lot of customers. We've got lots of disparate bits of technology, all with overlapping functionality. Some of them talk to each other and some of them don't. So if you've got a strategy around digital and customer experience, have a long, hard think about, do you have the infrastructure from a technological perspective to support that? Because if you haven't, it's going to make your journey and you can be as innovative as you want, but it'll make that journey very, very difficult. So making sure you've got the foundation in place from a technology perspective.
Graeme, Thank you so much, Wayne. Thank you as well. This is a wrap for today. Thank you guys for joining the show. I hope everyone could take a bit from the stories you just shared. Lovely having you on the show, and thank you one more time for being here with us today.
No worries.
And thanks again for having us.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you. This episode was sponsored by NICE, leading customer experience